Compared to other musical instruments, the national instrument of Trinidad and Tobago, the steel drum, is in its youth. It is less than a century old, but it has made its presence felt in world music. One of the chief navigators of the instrument's journey to its full potential is Trinidadian steel pan player, composer and teacher Teague.
Liam is that new kind of panist who has studied music formally and has studied, all aspects of instrumental Western music, classical music, jazz. In many ways, Liam he has opened a new door for steel band virtuosos and steel band arrangers. And of course, as he has always been known, even before he went abroad, as a virtuoso player.
The journey to those heights began with an innate talent, but it required help. Teague was introduced to the instrument as a child in his father's Cub Scout troop. As he grew older, his exceptional talent became evident, but opportunities were slim until he saw a chance and went after it.
So, no further introductions necessary. This morning, as we celebrate World Steel Pan Day, we have Liam Teague with us. Good morning, Mr. Teague.
Pleasant good morning. How are you doing?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for asking. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing really well. It's very early here in DeKalb, Illinois, but it's a pleasure to be with all of you and to speak to the people of Trinidad and Tobago.
And we are blessed to have you with us. Now, first of all, of course, we have to say congratulations to you on your latest achievement, which brings us together to opening the interview, asking you, were you surprised of your recent selection as a Board of Trustees professor?
A bit surprised and more grateful. This professorship was quite competitive, and it wasn't exclusive to professors in the School of Music. It was throughout the entire university. So, in essence, folks that would have been nominated would have been from the physics department, you name it, they were nominated. So, very, very grateful to Northern Illinois University.
Definitely. And maybe over the years, you have, of course, been an ambassador for steel pan, for our culture, and of course, for Trinidad and Tobago. So how does it feel to you? I know you said you're grateful, but do you have any other emotions that you would like to share with us from this latest and amazing achievement?
Well, just a great sense of pride. I haven't lived in Trinidad since I was 19 years old when I moved to the U.S. to study, initially at Northern Illinois University. And so for me, whatever I do with this instrument, I always have the people of Trinidad and Tobago in mind. So that's first and foremost in my mind. So whatever achievements I'm able to have goes way beyond me. I always feel like I'm an extension of Trinidad and Tobago.
Oh, you definitely are. You are a legend to us here. Even look, being on TTT with us this morning, and we would have grown up seeing you on our screens as well, which leads to asking you now, how would you rather describe your relationship with steel pan?
Well, the steel pan is everything to me. Let's just say when I was in the equivalent of high school in Trinidad and Tobago, academics wasn't necessarily my forte, but my passion really was music. And in a sense, we had a steel band at the Pleasantville Senior Comprehensive School, which I attended. And for me, that was sort of a sanctuary, being able to play in that band. And this instrument has done so much for me, and it's no cliche. It led to me meeting my wife, Lorena Nunez, who's from Panama, and that came about because I performed at the Panama National Symphony, and she was the principal violist of that symphony. I have two beautiful children. It's taken me all over the world, and essentially I live what I like to humbly say is my dream life, doing what I'm truly passionate about. So I'm eternally grateful for having steel pan in my life.
It's absolutely beautiful to hear that, because it shows, when you follow your passion, your dreams do come true, and sometimes are even bigger than that which you initially expected. Now, as you've said, you've been involved in steel pan, as we learned from the video, from childhood to now. When did you make that transition from being a musician to also becoming an educator in steel pan?
So teaching was never first and foremost in my mind. I never wanted to, become a teacher, become a professor. Um, but upon receiving both my bachelor's and master's degrees here at Northern Illinois University, the then head of the program, the late G. Allen O'Connor, who started the NIU Steel Band program, which incidentally will turn 50 years old in the spring of 2023. He basically groomed me to take over this position, and he retired several years ago. And I started teaching here in the early 2000s, and eventually I became a full professor, tenured professor, to today, where I was able to achieve one of the university's highest awards, the Board of Trustees professorship. So even though it wasn't necessarily my main passion, it's something that I've really grown to love. Mm-hmm. And I feel a great sense of pride seeing so many of my students from all over the world, but particularly Trinidad and Tobago, go back to their respective home countries and contribute in a profound way in many, many different avenues where the steel pan and music is concerned.
Now, Professor Teague, it's wonderful that you shared that with us because, of course, being an educator, one of the things that you have done as well is you've written a book. So was that just the natural part of the journey, and what was that process like for you?
It wasn't necessarily a natural part of the journey, and it's more of a method book, so it actually isn't that long. It's more of an instructional method. I was commissioned by the Hal Leonard Group of Companies, which is the largest producer of print music in the world. And in addition to sheet music, they also carry many tutorials. And so to my knowledge, this is the first one in the world that has been produced for the steel pan with the Hal Leonard Group of Companies. So quite an honor. And it's basically tailored to beginners.
Okay, wonderful. So for those of you who didn't know, now you know, and there you go. It's a way, of course, to continue to keep the music alive and the steel pan in general. Now, you've educated not just via the school routes, but also, of course, you've performed globally. Over the years, have you seen a shift in the acceptance and appreciation for the instruments?
Most definitely. I've been, again, very fortunate to perform and compose for ensembles all over the world. And still to this day, there's so many folks globally that have no idea what's possible on the steel pan. They don't really understand the versatility of it, the profundity. And many folks that are familiar with it, the so-called steel drum, as many people refer to it outside of the English-speaking Caribbean, they've heard it playing primarily folk music, which is beautiful. But like the pioneers of the steel pan, my mantra is to highlight the many musical possibilities. So there have been many shifts in attitudes where this instrument is concerned. And I think many, many people see it as a legitimate instrument, which we already know it is.
Oh, definitely. I couldn't agree with you more there, of course. For us and for the world now, it is a legitimate instrument. Now, would you say, as you just mentioned there, you've seen the evolution starting primarily with folk music, and we do hear it now even in, let's say, mainstream culture, for example, mainstream music. Sometimes in the background you'll be listening and be like, hey, that's a steel pan. Do you think that things like that have contributed to the evolution of the pan over the years?
In some ways, I think every little bit counts. I don't get super excited when I hear the instrument, just small samples of it. I don't get super excited about it because, again, my mission is really to show the versatility and the profundity of it. But I'm still grateful that, folks are using it in their respective songs. But I'm very, very encouraged by what's happening in the steel pan world, especially with the younger generation. Not only are they brilliant musicians, but they're very business savvy, and they're taking the instrument into avenues that are largely untapped. So it's very, very encouraging.
Now, I'm thankful that you just mentioned the younger generation as well, because one thing that is always on our minds, of course, is ensuring that steel pan remains mainstream. So with that in mind, tell me, what do you think can be done to ensure that continues?
Well, I think it starts and ends with education. And by that, I don't mean that every steel pan musician necessarily needs to have tertiary education, go to university, etc. But as the previous guest mentioned, we need to educate young people, not just in terms of the music, but in terms of the history of this instrument. Prior to coming to Northern Illinois University, I knew very little about the history of steel pan. It wasn't taught to me in Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm very careful when I speak about the ongoings in Trinidad and Tobago, because again, as I mentioned earlier, I haven't lived in the country since I was 19 years old. But from what I gather, still many young people don't know the history of the steel pan, of calypso music. And I was very fortunate in that one of my teachers here at Northern Illinois University at the time, the late Dr. Clifford Alexis, who was from Trinidad and Tobago, he lived and breathed the history. He was here from almost the embryonic stages of steel pan. So he saw and he did it all, and he educated me and helped me to develop a really profound sense and understanding of the history. And gratitude again for what the pioneers did for people like myself to be able to live my dream life. So that's very, very important, education, but also folks having a genuine love for this instrument. I hear quite often, folks talking about the steel pan as national instrument of Trinidad and Tobago, etc. But at the same time, how many steel pan recordings do they own? How many people actually go to steel pan oriented concerts? How many people go to Panorama with this, or the primary intention of listening to the music as opposed to the line? We can have a very extended conversation on that. So it has to go way beyond lip service, and it has to start with us, and not just folks outside of the steel pan fraternity, but within the steel pan fraternity. We need to be more supportive of what we do as a whole, and not just our respective bands or individual soloists that you may like. It has to be love across the board.
Agreed. Now, Professor Teague, you started at NIU as a student, then, of course, you're professor of music, the head of steel pan studies, and now this esteemed selection. Tell us something. What is one of your main objectives that you would like to achieve with this appointment?
Well, really, it remains basically the same since I was a teenager, to highlight the versatility and the profundity of the steel pan, to plant whatever seeds I can in the brains of the young people that come to study with me, so they in turn can go on to tell their personal stories. I'll just provide them with as much information that I can. But it hasn't changed that much. So whether it's me continuing to perform in a variety of musical settings, composing, arranging music for this instrument, and just doing what I can to be the best cultural ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago, and by extension, the wider Caribbean as possible.
Absolutely beautiful. Professor Teague, congratulations again. Thank you so much for continuing to champion the steel pan and represent us here in Trinidad and, as you mentioned, the region. We appreciate you, and we look forward to seeing you continue to grow and just glow in your dream life. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much. Pleasure being here.
Professor Liam Teague, as we celebrate steel pan right here on the Now Morning Show. There is some more coming up that you don't want to miss, so go and get some coffee. Wake up. The Now Morning Show will be back in a minute.